When we think of storytellers, really good storytellers, we think of people like Steve Jobs. Can we all be as good as Steve Jobs at storytelling? I think the answer is no.
Okay.
But can we all become better storytellers than we are today? Then absolutely yes. It's just one of those things that you have to invest in. You don't immediately sit down at a piano and know how to play.
Hello, this is Alistair, and thanks for tuning in to the Venture Variety Show. This is a podcast where I talk with founders, investors, and operators about how startups and the stories around them get built. Today, I'm excited to say our guest is Christina Farr. She's author of The Storyteller's Advantage. She's also a longtime journalist and investor and writer of the Second Opinion newsletter, which covers health tech. Her and I talk about the lessons from her book and why storytelling is no longer optional for leaders. Christina says storytelling drives everything from sales to culture, and she offers up what makes a great business story land. So let's jump in and say hello to Christina Farr. I'd like to introduce Christina Farr, book author and friend and journalist and investor and so many things. Tell us in your own words, Christina, who are you?
Well, thank you so much for that introduction. So you and I know each other from just being in media at the same time. And you were always kind of more tech in VC. I was more on the health tech side of things. So I spent a decade writing about these companies. And then at some point was like, I want to start investing in these companies. So joined a venture fund. And now I really just try to do a mix of things between working with companies on an advisory basis from time to time. I write a newsletter that comes out a couple of times a week about the healthcare industry, and I still actively invest. And on the side, I wrote this book, The Storyteller's Advantage, which I am so thrilled to speak with you about. And I think the reason I kind of share my background is that it really kind of combines the threads of my career because it's about the power of storytelling. Alistair, both you and I have been pitched probably thousands of times. And as a
Tens of
VC, I've been
thousands.
pitched too. So, tens of thousands. And so that really prompted me to want to write the book because, as you know, some people can pitch very effectively and the majority do not. And so what can we learn from the very best and how can we kind of emulate their success while still being true to ourselves?
Yeah, no, excited for this conversation. I love storytelling, and a true story. We both worked together, I think, but not really. We both worked for Thomson Reuters at the same time, but you were
Yes,
on a different floor than I was. But maybe I can tell people we worked together if it benefits
we
me at all.
did. Yeah,
We
we
did.
worked together. We were all too briefly colleagues.
There you go. Speaking of the book, do you have a copy? Tell us what it's called.
I do.
Storyteller's
So the
Advantage.
storyteller's advantage, how powerful narratives make businesses thrive. So it's exactly what we discussed. It's really that, how do you do it? And I wanted to make the book extremely tactical. So think of it almost like a Harvard Business Review series of case studies packed into a single book. Every chapter tells a bunch of case studies and stories of great storytellers, and then has a series of takeaways and lots of frameworks of just ways to think. Because I wanted to democratize storytelling and make it accessible for anyone.
It surprises me how not very good a lot of people are at telling their own story. They like to lean back on let the product or let the engineering, let the technical chops speak for their company or their product. But do you find this as well that people really don't lean into that storytelling aspect?
Yeah, so many good threads to that question that we should pull on. So I think the first one is really just this kind of general skepticism, underestimating of storytelling by executives. And I think that comes back from, decades ago when most CEOs were essentially kind of glorified accountants and bean counters, and that was an acceptable background because what you were tasked to do was really grow the business. This is particularly for-profit companies. And that was the job. And now things have changed. There's a fascinating study that I look at in the book where HBR did a piece where they looked at all these job listings associated with CEO jobs over time. And what they found is that in the past decade or so, words like storytelling and communications are now starting to appear in those job listings extremely frequently. So what's changed is that the job now has become so much more complex. You have got to motivate employees and make them excited every day to come to
Mhm.
work. You've got people living across the country. You have people remote. You've got complex political things happening in the world that you're expected to speak about. It's very different than it used to be. And so now having that storytelling capability is extremely important. And those who believe that the old way is still possible, I think will, not be as successful as they could have been otherwise. So that's the first point. And then the second one where you specifically said a lot of CEOs will, say that the technology can speak for itself. I actually find that to be a massive fallacy most of the time. So let's take the example of imagine you were pitching Facebook back in the day.
Mhm.
I think you could probably, with a consumer app, tell a fairly bad story and get away with it because I could say to you, Alice, here's Facebook, and you could play around with it and quite quickly, I think, get a sense of what Facebook is. Meanwhile, imagine you are building some kind of complex AI or a new robot or some kind of deep tech or biotech. What do you have? What product do you have to
Right.
show somebody? You have nothing, and you won't have anything for probably 10 to 15 years. And in that period, you still have to recruit people, you still have to raise money, you still have to build excitement. So that's even more requiring of really good storytelling. And that was actually one of the insights from the book as I talked to VCs and funds who said it's actually the most technical businesses that need storytelling the most.
I like that. I like that. I also like what you were saying too, that storytelling isn't just for leaders to tell a story to whoever, the press. It's for their internal culture. It's for hiring, recruiting, for instance, or sales. Did you find that was that surprising to you when you were researching the book that storytelling crosses all these disciplines? It's not just for talking to the media.
I don't think I was surprised by it necessarily, but it was something that I felt I had to say because I don't think that it's really recognized. I think a lot of CEOs will, if I say storytelling, will immediately think of the PR team.
Mm.
Um, and my response to them is like how, it's literally how you do everything. It's how you pour gasoline on the fire. You need good storytelling to hire people in a really difficult talent market, which is what we face today. You need it to sell, especially if you have an early stage business where it's a very tough sale. It's hard to convince customers in the early days. So you need good storytelling for that. You need it basically for every single aspect of the business. And I love what you said about internal culture as well. If we have I might share an example if you're open
Yeah,
to it from
please.
a
That sounds great.
um so there was a company in the book that is actually in my space of health tech. It's an company that treats really vulnerable patients who have eating disorders. And a lot of people who work at that company, as you might imagine, tend to lean more progressive. And so, I talked to the CEO who said, I am under a lot of pressure all the time to comment on everything that is going on in the world publicly and with my team because we obviously lean progressive, like given the mission that we have. But she said, the way that I have been able to solve for this is I shared a story and I regularly share the story with my own team about my own struggle with an eating disorder that led me to build this company. And, I come from a conservative family, and a lot of eating disorder patients that I know also come from conservative families. And if you think about the true north of the company, it's to treat patients and families with eating disorders. And if we start coming out, speaking politically about various topics, and a patient needs our help, and a family member says, not this company, because look at the politics, then we have lost a patient who needs us. So that is why we don't take a stance. And it's nothing about my own politics or how I feel personally. It's because the mission comes first. And she says she shares that story at regular intervals because, obviously people cycle in and out. And that because of that, she hasn't seen anybody transition because of this. And it's been the glue that really holds the company together. So I thought that was just a really fascinating example of how these kinds of personal stories and narratives can really tie everything together and get people just rowing, the boat in the same direction.
In that example, did she, the health tech leader that you talked about. Did she get training to, or was this just a natural, innate thing that she had that she was able to tell the story? Or did she get training from the, internal PR people or someone to learn how to tell the story?
That's a great question. And I would suspect, although I don't know for sure, her name, by the way, is Christina Saffron.
Mm,
I would suggest, think in her case that it was innate, because her background really stems from the nonprofit world. And she was spent a lot of her teens and 20s having to go out and fundraise for this cause that she cares so much about. So I would guess that more so than most entrepreneurs, she really had to develop that keen storytelling instinct because that is
mhm.
how you raise money. And so I think that that probably gives her an edge from a storytelling perspective. She was also one of the few CEOs that really sat down with me and acknowledged right up front, like, hey, my job is to be a chief storyteller. And I was able
Mhm.
to get the business to a point of being successful enough that I could hire all these people.
So, can anyone learn storytelling?
I actually do believe that anybody can learn
Mhm.
storytelling, but with a caveat. I think when we think of storytellers, really good storytellers, we think of people like Steve Jobs.
Absolutely.
If the question was, can we all be as good as Steve Jobs at storytelling? I think the answer is no.
Okay.
But can we all become better storytellers than we are today by embracing the things that feel authentic to us and doing it in our own way, but just making it consistent part of our practice? Then absolutely yes. It's just one of those things that you have to invest in. You don't immediately sit down at a piano and know how to play. Storytelling is a little bit like that, but you've got to start small and start in forums that feel comfortable and then build up over time.
Well, who is the book for? Is it
I think it's for everybody. And I wrote it that way. We have a whole chapter in the book that really kind of makes the point that storytelling isn't just for CEOs and explores how people in very different roles, like heads of product and heads of engineering, or even just people who are very upwardly mobile in their own careers, how they were able to embrace storytelling. I gave a couple of examples of people in my own network, like Claire Vaux, who's a very prominent product leader, and how she was able to really build up a name for herself in her own domain through X by
Mhm.
sharing a lot of just practical tips and insights about how to do product well. And I think that's really the key for operational leaders and people moving up that even though you're not the CEO, like you can certainly find things to do that speak to you. And if you can find ways to really kind of convene people in your own industry or domain or teach them different skills that you have that they may want to learn, I think that's a great way to move ahead. But I will say that a lot of these things are top down. So if you work at a company where the CEO is just not an effective storyteller and shows
Right.
no interest in storytelling, those are the companies where I tend to see that a lot of the employees don't really do it either. And it's just very hard to change cultures like that. So you really do need that kind of acceptance from on high, and you need a culture where storytelling is not only acceptable but encouraged.
Did anything surprise you when you were researching the book and writing it?
Yeah, I think a lot of things surprised me that you gave the example just now of interviewing for jobs. And I explored that, like how does storytelling support that? And I found some interesting studies that showed that there is actually like a lot of benefit in vulnerability in job interviews, like if you can acknowledge a real failing versus a fake one. But I also found that that tends to only work in cases where you're already perceived as a total rock star. So it's one of those things where you have to build yourself up first before you can betray a moment that maybe you didn't do something very well. And I think that's the kind of thing that really surprised me within the book is we use these sort of broad platitudes like, oh, you should be vulnerable. But I think in the world of business, it's all part of a game that you have to play where you do show vulnerability in certain contexts, but you're also careful to be portraying yourself in a way that can get people excited about you in the role or you as a leader. So it's you have to think about the human psychology when it comes to storytelling, and it's very much the same with fundraising. They have to believe that you are a founder with grit first, and then
Mm.
they can hear the story of failure. And if you can do both, it's like this incredible catalyst, because when you take grit and then you take that this person has had experience failing and was still willing to kind of get back up and try again, then it's just an absolute slam dunk. But you obviously don't want to walk into a fundraising meeting with only stories of failure. So I think with everything, it's a balance.
That's amazing. And you have to build your, what did you say? You have to build yourself, or you have to be perceived as a rock star to be able to share the vulnerability. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's part of just like the storytelling that, there are formulas and frameworks. And I think being kind of fully abreast of what those are. And then the other thing that was really important was just delving into some of the plots that tend to be really successful. And I found there was such strong links between the plots that we see in the world of entertainment, like in Disney movies and
Mhm.
Star Wars, the franchise of Star Wars, and lots of other things that we're like intimately familiar with, and then how those plots might apply in business. And it's the overlap is just incredible.
What would be a right way of using the marketing and the comms side?
I would think about putting comms as reporting to the CEO and really involved in a lot of the meetings that go on every single day,
I
so
see.
that they even know what's going on. I mean, imagine a journalist asks them a question and then they don't have a clue and have to go run it down to the right person. You've been there on
Sure.
deadline and you're waiting and nobody's getting back to you, and it's because they don't know the answer. And then think about how different that is with a communications person who is, the right hand of the CEO, and you ask them a question and they immediately know the answer. It's a completely different interaction. And if they're stuck with marketing, and marketing is really just thinking about leads for sales, then they just become about attention and buzz, and not about the, reputation of the business, not about the brand. They can't do projects that may have longer term ROI. It's all just about kind of clicks and page views. And I think that is like absolutely the wrong place for a comms leader to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So the bottom line, summing it all up, Christina, what lesson do you hope readers get out of the book?
I hope they get out of the book that it's accessible,
Hmm.
that it's for everyone. And if you maybe you're on the fence, that you get some ideas from the book about plots to try and different forums that, you could experiment, and you don't have to immediately go do a TED talk. You can start small. So I hope that's the main takeaway. And I hope all the case studies within the book are also inspiring, just kind of looking at some of the people who've done it very effectively, because this is the first book that really has kind of gone into detail about what those individuals did and tried to then kind of extrapolate what are the KPIs from really investing in storytelling. And I promise you that there are real KPIs. So I hope it's just that people take it more seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love the structure of the book, the various case studies. Did you address at all any impact that social media has had on storytelling?
That's really kind of throughout the book a
Yeah.
huge theme. We also talk a lot about how just media has changed in general. Social media now is a lot of how people consume information, and they get it far less from newsrooms.
Hmm.
And that kind of explains where, is so much more challenging right now than it ever has been because of this.
A lot of companies put out their own media. I mean, not necessarily even social, but a blog post and their own videos. I mean, that's the new reality.
No, I actually do think it takes a lot of time and energy.
Right.
And again, it's like if you only have comms reporting to marketing, you'll never do it because it's not going to lead to immediate ROI.
Right.
But I also think it should maybe, get companies thinking differently about owned media too. In the old days, it was like owned media was just like you paid a bunch of money to a publication to run a piece of sponsored content that nobody read. And I
Hmm.
think nowadays with independent media, which is kind of an area that I'm involved in through my newsletter, really innovative things are happening on the own side. Everything from dinners to, co-hosting on webinars to, having newsletter takeovers where somebody like me would write a piece that is of interest to a potential sponsor, but not just an ad for that sponsor. And now all these things are starting to be possible that weren't before. So I think we're about to see a lot of creativity and a lot of entrepreneurship in the own space as we continue to see and become, more and more challenging until we can really kind of figure out the right business models.
Oh, well, this has been really educational. I love talking stories. You mentioned your newsletter, Second Opinion, book author as well. What's next on the horizon for Christina Farr?
Well, it's just continuing to invest. I also started a fund, Scrub Capital, with two others and one of the three GPs, and so continuing to make bets in healthcare. And then it's really my newsletter and just making sure that it reaches more people. And I still love to write. I
Great.
will always and forever love to write. So it's been incredible to see it kind of take off and now be read by tens of thousands of people in the industry. And to be able to kind of own my own platform and distribution has been a really amazing kind of moment as well. So, it's just, I'm a big believer in media plus community plus venture and like
Mm.
find incredible kind of intersections between all of the above. So that's where I'll be kind of in the next couple of years, and always happy to grab coffee and get to know more people in the industry and speak to, friends and colleagues and journalists like yourself, because it is a tough job, really tough job, and we got to stick together.
Yeah, but enjoyable too. I feel the same way about writing. Well, Christina Farr, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and talking about the book. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
That was Christina Farr, author of The Storyteller's Advantage and founder of the Second Opinion newsletter. I really liked how she explained that storytelling isn't just a PR tactic, it's a leadership tool that helps CEOs and founders build culture, recruit personnel, and fundraise. So if you enjoyed this episode, please hit like and subscribe and share it with a friend who cares about startups and storytelling. That's it for now. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.